not part of the khutbah, and then we're going to call the adhan at 1 o'clock, inshallah, and then do 2 quick khutbahs in Arabic. So we're just going to follow the way you guys usually do the first khutbah. We do it slightly different in the second one. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على نبي محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. When I was coming today, I was thinking, what should we talk about? And I think it's always important to have our khutbahs very relevant to what's going around us. Of course, Afghanistan we talked about before, which is absolutely relevant, and we can continue to talk about it. But we're now in the Labor Day long weekend. And as Muslims, we always talk about it. We need to be reflective people. Allah tells us in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. We always need to be thinking. So as Labor Day comes, I want us to always be critical around the stuff happening around us. What's the origin of Labor Day? Why is it now a holiday in the United States? What should we take from it? What lessons should we drive from it? How does it relate to our religion? So let me just in the next couple of minutes give you a quick overview of what it's all about. And then really more importantly, link it to our day-to-day life and what we should be doing and how we should be thinking about it. And hopefully come Monday, inshallah, everybody just takes 20 minutes and reflects on what you hear today, inshallah. So Labor Day was basically, the idea came in the late 1800s. And the whole idea was that back then was the Industrial Revolution picking up, and the workers were working 12 plus hours every day. And some had actually very tough conditions, so they're working up to 18 hours a day. But think about it, 12 to 14 hours a day, just labor work, a ton of heavy work. And they were getting compensated pretty little about that. So as you would expect, demonstrations, people marching out, pressure on the politicians. It took decades and decades. Nothing happens too quick. It took decades and decades until the US government acknowledged it and it became a federal holiday, and they actually installed what we now use all, which is the 8-day working, the 8-hour working day. So basically, this is some folks that felt discriminated against, that felt abused, and then took it upon themselves and eventually got the 8-hour working day. What I want to focus on here is another important aspect of what people were asking for. When you think about somebody working 14, 16 hours a day, what else can they do in their day? It's basically only work. They have nothing else to do. You're working 14, 16 hours, you're sleeping 6 hours, and you barely have time to eat, and that's about it. And I think for us as Muslims, that's a very important thing to reflect on every year when Labor Day comes, which is the balance in our day. Allah says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. And wasat has a lot of different meanings, but it's a balanced ummah. And that balance needs to show everywhere. Part of it is how we spend our time. As we said in previous khutbah, time is perhaps the most important commodity that you have in your life. Because it's something that Allah gave you. You don't know how much you were given of it, because nobody knows when it's going to end. The more you use it, the less you have of it, because every minute doesn't come back, and it means 1 minute closer to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, as we say, you don't know how much you have of it, and you need to spend it wisely, because that's what you're going to be asked about. وَعُمْرِهِ فِيمَا أَفْنَاهُ. Your life and how you spent it. And your life is basically your time. Your time and how you spent it. And this is what we take from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ says, نِعْمَتَانِ مَغْبُونٌ فِيهِمَا كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ الصِّحَّةُ وَالْفَرَاغُ. The two bounties, a lot of people, including some of us, are on the wrong side of trade. مَغْبُونٌ فِيهِمَا كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ means if you're trading with somebody, you're actually on the losing side. What are those two bounties? الصِّحَّةُ وَالْفَرَاغُ. Health and free time. Because you don't realize the importance of health until you become sick or somebody around you becomes sick. And you don't realize the importance of time until you don't have much of it. So again, when we think about Labor Day, think about the balance that those folks were asking for. And now reflect about yourself and about myself. How do we spend our day? Are we back into the 14 to 16 hour working days because we just want to make more money? Then what is the progress? How do you spend the rest of your time? Or do we have a balanced usage of our time? And that balance, you need to think about it in multiple different dimensions. A simple dimension of that balance is how much time you're spending with different stakeholders, constituents that you work with. So basically, how much time do you spend at work? How much time do you spend by yourself, sleeping and stuff like that? How much time do you spend by your family? How much time do you spend helping others? So you need to have account for how you spend your time to make sure that you're actually on the right path. Because if you're only and solely spending your time working, which is pre-Labor Day, that's unlikely the best use of time. And I mean here work from a perspective of just spending it in the office. Because everything we do is struggle in the sake of Allah. Everything is sa'i. So if you want to expand the definition of work to include everything and anything, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual literal meaning of spending time at work, doing your actual full-time job. If that's what consumes 80% of your time, you might not be on the right side of trade when it comes to time. And again, as you said, it's the most precious commodity. So make sure that you're balancing that time that you have. And another dimension to think about is we always have, as human beings, two aspects to attend to. One aspect is our physical aspect. That's the worldly aspect. That's how much you eat, how much you sleep, how much you exercise. It's a very important aspect, by the way. But that's just one aspect of life. The other aspect we have is the spiritual aspect of life. So basically, how much time are you spending reading the Quran, reflecting on the Quran, doing your prayers, having time for your night prayers? Remember, take real examples. If you're working around the clock, you will never have time to do night prayers. Because guess what? You're working, then you're tired, you need to go to bed, and you barely wake up to go back to work. That's not the right balance that the Muslim should be in. So don't let life consume you so much that you want to accumulate wealth after wealth after wealth. And then you basically spend your most precious commodity. And when the certainty comes, when death comes, you look back and you say, yeah, I've done so much because I've made so much money. And I'm leaving all that behind to my kids. Which is a great thing, by the way, to leave your kids wealthy, as the Prophet ﷺ instructed us. But what did you do for yourself? How did you spend your time to get closer to Allah? To balance it. Again, as I said, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We're a balanced community. Nobody is preaching that you spend 100% of your time in the masjid, except in specific times like al-i'tikaf in Ramadan. But also nobody should be preaching and telling you to be fully driven behind the commodity and to spend all your time at work in the illusion of I'm making more time and progressing, I'm making more money and progressing. So again, think of that balance, think about it from particularly two things that we should all evaluate ourselves on, because these are the ones we ignore. One is the spiritual aspect of time. Count in your day how much you actually spend on spirituality, on actual ibadat, on prayers at night, on helping others. And the other dimension is think about the time you spend with others, starting with your family and then your friends and the extended community where you can benefit them. Because at the end of the day, what really lasts is the impact you've put on others. The impact you leave behind, where you've impacted your kids, you've impacted your family, you've impacted the broader community around you. That's what matters at the end of the day. The money and the wealth and all this stuff goes away. What comes with you in the grave are your actions and the effort you've put in your actions. And the effort, by the way, is highly correlated to the time you spent. Because Allah gave you specific expertise, but it's more around how are you going to spend your time and those expertise in the right path. So again, something to reflect on, particularly as we're in the Labor Day weekend, to take some lessons from people that did not like spending their whole, basically life, just simply working to make ends meet and for us not to go back to the same example, but rather be balanced human beings as Islam instructed us. Again, as we said, this was a quick reflection. We're going to do the adhan, and then we're going to do 2 short khutbahs in Arabic. تفضل الله بنا.
الله أكبر الله أكبر